Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Hauptwerk. Yes, we're back, and today I'm going to give you my demonstration of the latest French sample set, that's Nancy Cathedral, given to us by Piotr Grabowski, a rather wonderful sample set. Everyone's calling it a cavaille call sample set, and while that's partly true, it's not the whole truth. The organ isn't a cavaille call organ. He did have something to do with it in its past years, but it has been changed since. And anyway, we'll get to that when we talk a little bit about the history of the organ. So here we are. Today is my take on the Nancy Cathedral sample set. So as usual, I am armed with my cup of tea. It's sort of heat wave season here in Germany at the moment, which is hell up here. This room is under the roof of the house, and yeah, we didn't think about that when we planned the organ room, so that was a bit weird. But here we are. So to keep things refreshing, I have a cup of tea. You know what that means. Cheers. So, like I say, oops, spilling tea all over the place already. That's a good start, isn't it? Anyway, yes, this is a French organ. And it's a very important organ in the history of French organs for various reasons. Now, all of the details about the organ's history can be found on the Grabowski website, which I will obviously link below. And I do suggest you go and check it out because it's very interesting. There is also quite a bit of interesting history on the church website itself, mainly in French. I'm not sure if there's an English variation of it, but in this day and age, Google Translator will do a fairly decent job to let you know what's going on. But something that is rather interesting there is that they are currently restoring and reinstalling a choir organ in the cathedral in Nancy. And proceeds from sales from this sample set are flowing back to Nancy Cathedral towards that choir organ project. So if you're interested in helping out, purchasing this sample set is also helping out that project. And that's a rather interesting and rather important cavaille call project. So do check that out as well. Like I say, links below to all of those things, and yeah, do please check it out. You won't be disappointed. Right then, so what do we have? Well, the Grandes Orgues of Nancy Cathedral, or the plural Grand Orgue with S at the end, of Nancy Cathedral. We are talking about a 4-manual plus pedal instrument. How handy that I have 4 manuals here at my console. And in the Hauptwerk version, we have a sort of a depiction of the organ with the stops and the rather cute handwriting and so on and so on. But rather important are the little controls down here in the pedals. Now, don't forget, the French Romantic organ movement was very, very important for the history of the organ in general, and certainly when it came to things like registration. And the French organs of the time split the organ up into various different divisions, and then those divisions were further split up into well, what you can basically say are sort of foundations and big guns. Yeah, and you can sort of pull out all the stops and then only activate some of the stops when you press one of these pedals here to activate them. So it was a very clever way of quickly changing registrations. You could move stops around and then just call them up, as it were. And these things in these French organs are actually called appels, and that's the French word for call, or recall, I suppose. And we'll get to that in a minute. Now, very important organ from the cavaille call side of things. Now, I did say this is not necessarily a cavaille call organ, but he had a lot to do with it. And the way the organ is set up has a lot to do with what he did to the organ in 18, whatever it was. First of all, this is very important because it was the first organ he made with a 32-foot reed stop down in the pedals. So that's rather important historically, but it's also one of the first of his largest organs, with more than 3 manuals and over 60 stops. A very large instrument indeed. So how is the organ set up? I think that's probably the first thing to go over. And that's actually very interesting. Now we shall get some parallels to the organ in Saint-Sulpice in Paris. Now, if any of you know anything about the organ in Saint-Sulpice, it was obviously Cavaillé-Coll's largest organ, 5 manuals, over 100 stops. And the layout of those manuals is sort of mirrored here a little bit. Now, I'm talking about the original layout of Saint-Sulpice, not the layout we have today. For example, the uppermost manual, in my case the 4th manual, in the case of Saint-Sulpice the 5th manual, that is the récit, the swell. And that's the top manual, and that's the way that a lot of Cavaillé-Coll organs were at the time. Now, in Saint-Sulpice, it is no longer the uppermost manual. It moved from 5th to 4th position, and then the solo went up on top. And that was different. That changed during Vidor's time at Saint-Sulpice. It was just too much of a stretch to play up in the 5th manual all the time. So they reallocated that. Now, here it's the 4th manual. The 3rd manual is called the bombard. And the bombard is, it's part of the organ that you wouldn't necessarily use all by itself. Why is it a separate manual? Well, you can use it all by yourself, but the repertoire of the time would sort of dictate otherwise. It's a kind of separate Grand Orgue. Now, the 2nd manual here is the Grand Orgue, and the bottom manual is then the positif. Now, that's sort of slightly different to most French Romantic organs, where the Grand Orgue would always be the bottom manual, and then the positif, then the swell, or then something, and then the swell. So it's a slightly different setup here. Now, this Grand Orgue manual here is actually more like the Grand Chœur manual you will find in Saint-Sulpice. That's the bottom manual in Saint-Sulpice. And it's kind of like a manual you couple everything to. It does have its own stops, its own independent stops, but it's the manual you sort of use to couple everything together. So in Saint-Sulpice you have the Grand Chœur, then the Grand Orgue, then the positif, and so on and so on. So that's the way that works. But here we have the positif under there. Then we have this Grand Orgue, which is our coupler manual. Get to that in a second. Then our bombard, then the récit, the swell. So what does this actually mean, this coupler manual down on the Grand Orgue? Well, it's rather simple. Here's a screenshot of the organ. If I pull out, let's say, 2 stops on the Grand Orgue, that would be the Montre 8 and the Bourdon 8. If I play something, nothing happens. That's weird. Why is nothing happening? Well, let me choose another manual. What if I choose the principal 8-foot and principal 4-foot on the bombard? That's working, I can hear that. What if I pull out the principal and the 4-foot flute and the 2-foot flute on the swell? I can't hear anything there either. So what's going on here? Obviously something has to be done so that I can get these stops to work. What about the bottom manual? Montre 8, Bourdon 8 on the positif? That's working. So when you sit at this organ for the first time, whether it's the real organ or the Hauptwerk sample set organ, there are obviously certain things I have to activate to get some of these things to work. Now, let's start with the Grand Orgue. Why is nothing happening when I play the Grand Orgue? I can see the keys moving on my screen, so something should be happening. I have a connection between my console and the software. I've pulled out some stops, but nothing is happening. It's working there. It's working there. It's also not working there. So there's obviously something I need to do. So here's where this becomes the coupler manual. The first thing I have to do is couple the Grand Orgue to the Grand Orgue. Does that make any sense at all? Not at first, but it will later. So now I've coupled the Grand Orgue to manual number 2, and it's done, thankfully, with this very clever little foot piston here. And suddenly I have my Grand Orgue stops. Wonderful. So what about then if I want to do the same thing up on the récit? Why aren't those stops sounding? Well, that has nothing to do with these couples. That's got something to do with, like I said at the beginning, these appels. You have to call the stops up. So everything that's written in red, everything that's got red ink, shall we say, on the stop names, need to be activated. And those are activated with these red colors down at the bottom. It's all very good, isn't it? Color coordinated. So I want to switch on the appel for the récit, that's AR, and suddenly I have my stops active on the swell. So that's quite confusing at the beginning. You need to sort of work these things out. Now, back to these couple of things. What does this mean? Actually, let me leave the appels on. I'll just put them on all the time, have them there. It means I can couple individual things to this manual. So I've pulled out stops on all the manuals. So I can couple the positif up. Perfect. I've already done the Grand Orgue. I can couple the bombard down. and I can couple the C down as well, and of course I can have all of these on here. So if I switch on all 4 couples, I have all 4 of my manuals coupled together, and you can see that represented by all 4 keys moving, all 4 keyboards, sorry, moving in the software itself. Now, that's sort of how that works. Now, why would you need something like that? Well, let's take a piece of music that we all know and love. Shall we say Widor's Toccata? We all know and love Widor's Toccata. If you haven't checked out a version of Widor's Toccata recorded on this organ, on this sample set in fact, then do check out my friend Jerry Martin's version. There's a link to it. He recorded this recently on his Hauptwerk organ, and a rather wonderful setup he has, and it works rather nicely. However, Jerry does use all the manuals that he has, and you don't need to do that when you play Widor's Toccata. It wasn't designed to be played like that. If you play Widor's Toccata in the Sansu piece, you play it all on the bottom manual, on the Grand Chœur, just using these couples, the couplers, just using the couplers and the appels to switch things on and off. Now, I will admit, towards the end of the piece, there is that bit where the left hand goes up onto the positive and plays over there. So you do need 2 manuals towards the end, but the rest of it's just all played on 1 manual, and you just switch these things on and off with your feet as you play along. That's the way Widor did it, and that's the way people still do it, certainly in Saint-Sulpice and other organs. There is a recording of Monsieur Vexot, Johann Vexot, playing the organ in Nancy, playing the actual organ in Nancy, and he plays it all on the Grand Orgue, just using the couplers and the appels until he gets to the final section where he plays up on another manual with the left hand. So, does that explain the coupler? I hope so. So before we have a look at the individual stops on the organ, we're not going to go through every single one because that's going to take forever. I want to just point out something here that is quite interesting. If you look at the colors of the stops on the screen here, the positive stops are this sort of pinky color, which is quite cute. Well, let's go from the top actually. We have the green stops of the pedal, the yellow stops of the swell, the récit, an awful lot of blue stops, some of them with black writing, some of them with red writing, and then down at the bottom the positive stops in pink. So what's this here with all this blue? Is this all Grand Orgue? Well, no, not really. Half of it, the red stuff, is the bombard. And that's why, for example, when you look down at the appels, there's not a separate appel for the bombard. You just couple the bombard in to the great division and it's active. If you think of it, I said at the beginning, sorry, I've got something in my eye. It's most annoying. Oh, it's my finger. If you think of the bombard as a sort of an appel to the Grand Orgue as itself, that's probably the easiest way to describe that. It's the big guns for the Grand Orgue. So all the big reed stops and the big principals and the mixtures and things, they all belong to the bombard or the Grand Orgue Part 2, as it were. Right. Let's dig in and have a look at most of or some of these stops individually. Right, now for this I'm going to need my headphones so that I can hear what I'm playing. I'm doing this in a very complicated way today. I'm testing out some new equipment. So I have a camera that I'm testing out here, picking up the video here. I'm using a screen recording software to record what I'm doing on screen. The audio from Hauptwerk has been recorded internally, at least I hope it is. It says it's being recorded, so that's fine. And this microphone is also being recorded by an external recorder over there. So that's how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 different sources of material I'm going to have to cut together when I start editing this video. So that's going to be fun. I'm now using DaVinci Resolve to edit my videos. I don't know if anyone's noticed any difference, but I find it much easier, a much better workflow. And if you're interested, let me know in the comments below. I would be happy to do a sort of editing workflow video with you to show you how I go about doing all of this. It's a wonderful piece of kit. If you're making up your own videos, stop using Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro, start using DaVinci Resolve. It's free for the basic version, and believe me, there's pretty much everything in the basic version. And it's much better, much easier, much more intuitive. Anyway, headphones on, making sure I've got the cable behind me so it's not banging on this one here. All these little things you have to think about when you're making films. So, let's start. This is going to be a long section, so bear with me. We have over 60 stops to get through here. I won't be looking at every single one of them, at least not individually. Let's start down on the positive division. Now we have a nice bourdon 8-foot, a nice 8-foot flute, which is very, very nice. And I'm going to let that beautiful acoustic speak pretty much all the time as well. There is not a 4-foot flute down on there, but we do have a sort of little principal chorus, starting with a montre 8-foot, that's a principal 8-foot, a diapason as you will. And it's quite a thin sounding montre, but it's a rather nice one. Very nice, gentle sound. It comes with a Preston 4-foot, sorry, English and German together, it's all very confusing, and a doublet 2-foot. I need the appel for that. Is it on? Yes, it is. The doublet 2-foot, that's a sort of a little principal 2-foot. So I have my principal chorus 8, 4, and 2. That's a very cute little chorus. Now then there are the usual mutations you might find in a positive division. The 2 2/3 nasar, I'll add that to the principal chorus. There is a tierce, 1 3/5 to give a nice sort of fruity effect. Now if I cleverly just use the bourdon 8 with the nasar 2 2/3 and the tierce 1 3/5, I have a clarinet. Basic harmonic principles. Now, over on the other side, I have some rather interesting stuff. I have a larigot 1 1/3, so that's an octave higher than the nasar. So let's switch that on with the principal chorus. It's a very bright sound. I can get rid of that and add a piccolo or 1-foot or 1-foot flute. It's quite seldom on an organ of this. Gives a nice chirpy sound. And then we have a rather nice 4-rank mixture, a fourniture. Which is certainly very cute. Now we have a basson et hautbois, so a bassoon and oboe in one register, in one stop. What does that mean? Well, let's play from the top. It's a bit beefier at the bottom end and a bit more oboe at the top end. Does that make sense? So, yes, there you are. A rather nice French. Another nice French oboe. There's a crom-on 8-foot, which is the sort of buzzy reed. I love things like that. They're very cute. You can play them nice solos, of course. And you can buzz around on them for jazzy stuff as well, which is kind of cute. Then there is an 8-foot trumpet and a 4-foot clairon. Here's the trumpet. This is only the positive division, so it's a lot of stops just for one little manual here. 8 and 4-foot reeds. That's pretty good, isn't it? Let's add the principal chorus to that. I'll leave off the 1-foot because I wouldn't bother with that. That's just the positive, don't forget. Yes, that's a big sound already. Now, to beef that up even further, they've added a cornet, a 5-rank cornet mixture, which is only comes in from middle C. Now, hold on its own, the cornet is a it's a sort of mixture of pipes based around the harmonic range, the harmonic row, as you would expect, and it sort of beefs up the principal chorus and the reeds. So just give it a bit more. So it was with the cornet, here's without the cornet. I like that. Now that was just the positive division. Let's have a look at the Grand Orgue on its own. We of course have a flute harmonique, 8 foot. Which is an invention of Cavaillé-Carr, don't forget. So there is of course a nice little bourdon à foot. I think this is quite a sort of a sentimental sounding bourdon, 8 foot. I don't know if you know what I mean. I'll play a minor chord and you get what I mean. I like that. It's got a very sort of soft, melancholy sound. Flute harmonique and bourdon together. The first 4-foot flute, that's a flute douce. That's a rather nice little flute chorus. There's a bourdon 16 there, which is also rather melancholy. Rather nice indeed. Now, we have a Montre 8 foot, which on its own is not that big. Not big for a Grand Orgue, is it? We'll come to that in a minute. There's a 16-foot Montre to beef that up. Add to that the 4-foot Preston and the 2-foot Doublette. Why not the quint 2 2/3 while we're at it? And we have a nice little principal chorus. Now that's already the start of a rather interesting chorus sound. Oh, my poor dog is dreaming downstairs. I wonder, can you hear him? He's having a bad dream. Some dogs have that. If we move up to the bombard briefly before we get to the rest of the Grand Orgue, we also here have a principal 8, and this is slightly bigger. So if I couple the bombard down using the pedal coupler there, and now I have my Montre 8 and my principal 8. And that's the big French woofy Montre sound we're looking for. So we need those together. So that's why the bombard is sort of Grand Orgue Part 2. Okay, now let's stay up on the bombard division. We have principal 8, 4, and 2, so it has its own principal chorus. And if I decouple those, I have my principal chorus on the great and on the bombard. very different, but when I couple them together, it's a much more impressive sound. So let's stick to the bombard division while we're up here. This is where we get to the rather exciting reeds. The Grandes Orgues reeds, basically, they're all up here. Now we have two 8-foot trumpets, something of an anomaly. Here's the premier trompette, 8-foot. And here then is the deuxième trompette. You would imagine the deuxième trompette is going to be a little softer and rounder. Wrong. Much fruitier. Both of those together. Very exciting sound. Add to that the 16-foot bombard and the 4-foot clairon, and we've got the most enormous battery of great reeds. I'll play it on the great because I've coupled them together. I love that thump of the general cancel as that goes there. Little toys for boys with Hauptwerk, I suppose. That doesn't exist on the original organ, so it's here and it makes a nice crack. There is, of course, a crom-on up here on the bombard. You would never normally find that on a Grandes Orgues division, so there's a second crom-on that sounds like this. Let's compare that to the positive crom-on. Very different, isn't it? Very different, isn't it? Let's have them together. A bit of fun together. Wow. I think that's pretty impressive. What else do we have up there? Well, there's some other we obviously have some mixtures there. So we have a 5-rank mixture called a fourniture again, and a 4-rank cymbal, which is a very over the top. Now let's build up a nice sort of French style chorus here using all our principal sounds. So that's 16, 8, 4, and 2. I've put the quint on there to beef it up a bit. Add to that the 5-rank mixture. Now that's a very French romantic sound. That's what a cavaille mixture should sound like. Now, at some point in the future, from the cavaille time, somebody added this 4-rank cymbal mixture. It's much brighter. So here's both of those mixtures together with that principal chorus. Even playing down in the lower range there, you can hear how much brighter that is. Now that's not a very cavaille sound, but it's definitely there. Now let's add the reeds to that lovely sound. Let's leave off the crom-on though. Cymbal is again off, and here's our proper great organ sound. Now again, here in this manual, we have a cornet to beef that up even further. And the cornet really is used to sort of fill out the harmonic range and sort of beef up the reeds, beef up everything else. It just adds much more sort of brilliance and flavor. That's the whole point. It can be used as a solo stop as well, don't forget. But yeah, you mainly use it to beef things up there. Now that is a rather exciting sound. Let's move up then to the swell division. Now, a swell division wouldn't be a swell division without, see me moving the swell pedal there? Without some swell strings. So viol de gambe and it's voix céleste at 8 foot. Always a delicious sound on any organ. Now, something that's rather rare on this organ is a quintatone 16, which beefs up those strings no end. A rather rare sound, a rather beautiful sound. Now then, we have a bourdon 8 foot, an 8 foot flute, rather cute. Which has a flute octaviante, 4 foot, and even an octavin, 2 foot, sorry, God, can't do this. Always a cute sound. If we leave out the 4 foot flute and just have the 8 and 2 foot flutes, you get that lovely sort of hollow sound. I must practice my scales. We have a principal 8 foot here, we've heard that before. I think that's my favorite principal sound on this organ, it's rather lovely. Now, there is no 4 foot principal, so we sort of, little principal chorus, we can build that up with the 8 foot, 4 foot, 2 foot flutes. Principal 8 foot, and we can add to that the plein jeu. It's just a mixture. We don't know how many ranks because he didn't tell us. I'm guessing it's 5. A lovely bright sound. We also have here a basson et hautbois. And you can definitely hear the difference in voicing here. The lower end is much beefier. Whereas the upper end is much more nasal, much more solo oboe. So you can definitely hear the difference there. We have, of course, an 8 foot trumpet, a trompette. Probably a trompette harmonique, but I'm not certain. It has a 4 foot clairon and a 16 foot basson to beef it up a bit. Just the 16, 8 and 4 reeds with the mixture together gives a pretty much full swell sound on its own. But if I then add everything else to that, including the cornet we have on this manual, so that's 3 cornets on this whole organ. It's amazing, isn't it? We have a big swell sound. Swell closed. That's just full swell, isn't that amazing? That's a big, big, big sound. So when we get to a piece of music at the end of the video, I will couple all that together and show you what it sounds like together. Now, down in the pedals, what do we have down the pedals? We have 3 16-foot flue stops, a sous-basse 16, so bourdon 16. Which is a very gentle, but certainly gives us some bass. Then there's a contrebasse 16, that's more of a sort of stringy sound. Much bigger and beefier, but then the biggest of them all is a 16-foot flute. I'm guessing it's an open flute, which is why it's so big. Very big sound. Here's the 16s together. Wow. Now, we then have an 8-foot and a 4-foot flute to build that up a bit, and they're big. A big cathedral organ needs a 32-foot stop or 2, and we have 2 here. Here's a sous-basse 32, along with the rest of that. Nice big rumbly sound, isn't it? Now, there are no less than 8 reeds down on the pedal. That's a lot. 8 reed stops on the pedal. That's a hell of a lot. And they are split into 2 sides. Now, the appel for the pedal, this little switch here, controls only the 3 reed stops on the left side of the organist. So that's the 16-foot contrebasson. The 8-foot basson, and the rather lovely 4-foot baritone, which you would use as a solo, I suppose. Rather delicious, aren't they? So those 3 together give a big sound already. Add to that the basics of the pedal, so all the flue stops. There is a 3-rank mixture there as well. Let's add that into that with the 3 softer reeds. And that's already a pretty impressive battery of pedal stops. What about this side, the right-hand side of the console? We have 5 reed stops ranging from 32-foot, don't forget Carval's first 32-foot reed, all the way up to a 4-foot clairon. So let's start with the bombard 16. Hold on a minute, we've got 2 bombard 16s. What does the first one sound like? Oh, it it doesn't sound at all. I'm guessing that means there's something else we have to switch on here. Now my appel for the pedal is already switched on. There's a separate appel for this side. That's the 32-foot appel. That has to be switched on. Now I have bombard number 1. It's got a nice buzz to it. Now, the second bombard, are we assuming that's going to be the same as the trumpets? It's going to be louder. Yes. Much bigger, much raspier. Now, how about the two of those together? I think they've been sampled very, very nicely. You can get some nice crisp attack on them. Now, what about the 8-foot trumpet and the 4-foot clairon added to that? Yes, of course there is a 32-foot reed. I've mentioned it several times, and here it is. I think they've even sampled the whole church rattling about to that. Right, full pedal. Let's just bang on everything here we've got. This is amazing. Wow. If you're not listening to this on decent headphones or good speakers, then go and get some. Try that again. It's eardrum blowingly good. Now then, that's the organ as it appears in the church, pretty much. Oh, that's not true. There's one thing I've forgotten, sorry. I've missed out the voix humaine, up in the récit division, the vox humana, and it should exclusively be played with the tremulant, which is also activated with a foot piston. Now, I'm not sure if the tremulant was sampled individually or added digitally afterwards. I'm not 100% convinced. If you know what I mean. So I'm not 100% convinced with that. There is a second tremulant on this, and it's down on the positive division, and it's rather beautifully called a sonnet, which I think is delicious. So here's the Bourdon 8 with the sonnet. I think that sounds much more realistic. Now, while we're on the subject of realistic and authentic, let me take you across to this page of the sample set. This is called the Simple Jam. It's just a list of all the stops on one screen in a row so you can see what's going on. And it's rather cleverly laid out. All the white stuff is the normal stops, all the red stuff is controlled with the appels. And all the appels, as you can see, are here. The couplers are here, the pedal couplers are here, called tiras in French. And then there are some extensions, some things that were added to the organ by Piotr Grabowski and the team. For example, the sub-octave coupler, which takes everything that you've got on the Grandes Orgues, whether it's coupled or not, and gives you an octave lower with that. He also added an extended récit to positive, so 4-to-1 coupler, which you would find on more modern French organs. That much is true. But this organ didn't have it. The idea is you couple everything to the grate. That's the whole point. And he also added an extended version of the positive as an enclosed division, so swellable. Now, he also added a crescendo pedal. Now, I have 3 swell pedals on mine, so I can have the swell on one, the positive on another, and the crescendo pedal on another. So, why would you want that? Well, it's just a nice addition to the organ. What does the crescendo pedal do? Well, if you just play with nothing, so no stops, I'm playing keys and pedals, and the crescendo pedal is closed. As I open it, it adds stops. All the way up to full organ. If you play sort of music by Reger or any of that nonsense, then yeah, you'll be used to using a crescendo pedal. I'm not the greatest fan of Reger's music, so I'm going to ignore that for now. So those are the little things that have been added to the organ to make it more modern and versatile, shall we say. But there are other things that you can play around with. And let me now introduce you to the settings page of the sample set. I hope you're still with us. It's quite a long video, I know, but if you're enjoying what you're hearing and seeing so far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up on the way. Now, this is where the beauty of Hauptwerk comes into its own. Now, disclaimer. A sample set on a Hauptwerk organ isn't going to be a 100% authentic representation of the organ in the church it was installed in, or concert hall, or whatever. It can't be. It physically cannot be. Don't forget, in a church, pipe organs, there's an air moving. That air moving gets the vibrations going, and it just sounds and feels different to any form of digital recreation. Even if you have 1 million speakers to correspond to 1 million different pipes, they're not moving the air in the same way. So it's just impossible for a digital version of an organ as sampled to 100% authentically recreate the feeling of being there. But we can get pretty damn close, and that's what this enables us to do. So when you install this organ on your Hauptwerk system, you are, well, first of all, you have the option of various different channels of samples. There are close-up samples, front samples, middle samples, and rear samples. So 8 individual samples here in 4 stereo groups, as it were, like I say, called close, front, middle, and rear, and there they are there. And you can mix that around. Now, imagine you're sitting at the console of the organ. So let's get rid of some of this. Say you're sitting at the console of the organ. Now let me pull up some registration here. That doesn't sound very authentic, does it? If you're sitting at the console, you would never hear that. Doesn't sound very good at all, does it? If I take that up to 100%, does that sound better? Not really. Why not? Well, picture yourself at the console of an organ in a cathedral. If the console is up with where the pipes are, you're sitting there, and let's assume that behind you you have the positive pipes. So they're the ones you hear pretty much the best, but kind of muffled, yeah, because they're behind you. Then in front of you, you're going to have the Grandes Orgues pipes, and in this case, you'd have the bombard pipes around that. Right at the top of the organ case, you're going to have the récit pipes, they're much further away, and the pedal pipes are miles away, left and right, split up, C side, C sharp side. Yeah, so that's all sort of spatially in different places, and Peter has very kindly given us the possibility of mixing the individual divisions in the individual mixes. Does that make sense? So you can sort of tell yourself, right, I'm sitting at the console, the pedal stops are miles away. So let's take the pedal stops down to, I don't know, let's take them down to 40%, because that's how much you would hear as you sit at the console. What about the positive? Well, it's right behind me. Let's leave that 100%. I'm going to hear most of that. The Grand Orgue, maybe a little bit less, let's say 90%. What about the bombard? I don't know, let's say 80% or thereabouts. And the récit being quite a long way away, I don't know, let's say 50%, yeah, something like that. So now when I play that, still sounds very unauthentic. Why? Well, when you're sitting at the organ like that, don't forget you hear the room around you as well. So let's mix in some room. Now, my computer system only allows me to load up 6 of the 8 channels. I don't have enough RAM, so I've loaded up the close, the front, and the rear. So let's add some front. Now, if I'm sitting at the organ, I'm going to get quite a lot of the front. So let's put this up to about, I don't know, 60%. Now, the rear, let's record it a long way away. That's the acoustic of the church, basically. So I'm going to get a lot of that, aren't I? So let's take the rear and pump that up to, I don't know, let's pump that up to 60 as well. Why not? So 100% close, 60% front, 60% rear. Now if I play, to me, that sounds much more authentic. Much more authentic. Now, let's pretend I'm now sitting somewhere else in the church. I can then, of course, play around with my mix as I wish. I could pretend I'm playing at a mobile console downstairs. So there I would have maybe more of the front, less of the close. You know what I'm getting at now? Let's say 60 of that. And I don't know, I could leave that, I'll just leave that set as it is now. But now I've changed that around. So you can play around with all of these settings rather a lot. However, it's still going to sound slightly artificial for one reason and one reason only. And this is like painting the Forth Bridge in Scotland, yeah? The famous rail bridge. You finish painting it at one end and then, oh God, you've got to go and start again at the other end. An organ will never be completely and perfectly in tune. Yeah? Temperatures rise and lower over the course of the day, sun shining through the windows, seasons moving on, and so on and so on. The organ will never be 100% in tune. And as any of you who have ever had to tune an organ know, the reed pipes will be completely differently tuned or in tune to the flue pipes, which themselves will be in and out of tune all the time. So, Mr. Grabowski has rather kindly given us the ability to detune the reed and the flue pipes from each other. Let me show you what I mean. So here's a note. Perfectly tuned. If I push the reed detuning up to 100%, it's going to sound horrible, but that's what it would sound like if 100% of the reed stops were out of tune. So let's take that down a bit. I don't know, let's say, I don't know, 35% or something. That's based on an educated guess. I've tuned organs with hundreds of reed pipes and reed stops before, and trust me, 35% is a pretty good bet. Now the flue pipes, that's the mixtures and the foundations and things, they're also never going to be 100% in tune. So let's take that, I don't know, to about 20% detuned and 35% in the reeds. Now I have a rather authentic sounding French organ. No detuning. It's very subtle, very, very subtle, but it makes all the difference. Trust me. Like I say, if you're not listening on decent headphones, go and get some, listen back to that bit and try it again. So you can play around with all of these little features to get the perfect sound for you, and that's rather different. And you can then save 3 different presets. Now I have done that, but I'm not going to let you into my secrets. Those are my secret presets. So I'm going to leave that like that. Now, I think it's time to play a piece of music, don't you? I don't know if you noticed in the background, but I've had to make a little break in the middle there, take a little break in the middle there. If you look out the window, we've just had the most amazing thunderstorm, and I thought I'd better you can hear that over the microphone. This is quite amazing. It's right overhead. I think a bolt of lightning probably hit the farm just over there. It looked like it was pretty much direct. So yes, very exciting stuff. So yes, perfect for sort of menacing organ music. But anyway, yes, it's time to play a piece of music to finish up this video. Now, like I said back at the beginning, there are many recordings and presentations of this sample set featuring wonderful pieces of music, and I will also be joining that league. Remember a while ago I promised a few pieces of music, a few French pieces of music for various stages of subscribership, as it were. Now, we've just passed the 40,000 subscriber mark, so for that I promised a version of Alain's litanies, which you're going to get. I'm going to play the original version from, there was an original version and there was an edited version. And pretty much everybody plays the edited version these days. So I'm going to play the original version. I do have the music for it. It's only ever so slightly different, but let's see if you notice the differences. Sort of manual and registration changes are slightly different, but anyway. So I will play the original version of that. That's coming very soon because I promised that for 40,000, not 45,000. I promised. I promised Incantation pour un jour saint from l'anglais, so that's coming soon, hopefully when we hit the 45,000 subscriber mark. And then for 50,000, I promised Widor's Toccata and some Dupré. Now this is a Dupré Jubilee year this year. 50 years since Dupré died, and so I promised I would play the Cortège et Litanie from Dupré. That's actually one of my all-time favorite pieces of organ music anyway. Wonderful piece of music. Not the most difficult piece of Dupré, but anything by Dupré is rather difficult, especially if you don't have huge hands. I've got sort of Donald Trump hands, unfortunately, so you need big hands for Dupré. Lots of tenths all over the place, and I can just about get them in the right hand. The left hand's not a problem, but the right hand. So anyway, but yes, to cut a long story short, for the 50,000 subscriber mark, you will get a full concert of French goodies: the Alain, the Incantation, the Cortège et Litanie, and Widor's Toccata, and most likely all performed here on Nancy. So I'm quite looking forward to that myself. I like having challenges to work towards. So that's coming up. So if you are one of the, shall we say, slightly larger percent of viewers who have not yet subscribed, then do hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, give us a thumbs up. So what's today's piece of music? Well, like I say, other people have been performing all sorts of wonder stuff on this, but at the end of the day, it's a church organ, and church organs are there to accompany congregations and choirs. Now, certainly in Germany, for the last 15 months or so, no congregational singing has been allowed in the church because of viral problems, and that's still the case. We're possibly easing up soon that they'll still be allowed to, or that they'll be allowed to sing again during church services, but at the moment they're not. So it's either up to the organist, him or herself, to sing, or with a very small group of people from the congregation or a choir who want to come along and sing some hymns. So I'm going to close up today with a hymn. And I'm going to play 3 verses and a short postlude on one of my favorite hymns, and also one of the most popular hymns here in Germany, a very old hymn called Großer Gott, wir loben dich. Wonderful old hymn tune, and you can really play around with the harmonies on it, as I am about to do. And then I will finish off with some sort of up registered, some tutti stuff at the end to show you what this thing could sound like in a church context. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening. I hope it wasn't too long for you, and I hope you did learn something new or interesting about this wonderful instrument down in Nancy. Don't forget, you can support the Nancy Choir Organ Project by going to Piotr Grabowski's page and ordering the organ for yourself. Definitely worth it. As far as I remember, Piotr still has an opening offer on the organ at a slightly reduced price coming up, so do head over there and check it out for yourselves. And yeah, you'll find all the history of the organ on his website as well, or on the Nancy Cathedral website. A wonderful instrument. Here then, Großer Gott, wir loben dich, on the Nancy Cathedral organ. See you next time. Bye bye.